We're living in a digital age, but planning is stuck in the past. However, these days might be coming to an end. Encouraging changes proposed to the emerging Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill could, in theory, change the game with regards to public engagement with the planning process. Today, I'm joined by experts from across the industry to discuss what all this means.
Digitising that engagement so that it's not dependent on people coming to events, which only a tiny minority do, and getting a lot more people involved will make it possible to get a much broader, more representative view from the public about things, which almost by definition will be more positive.
How do you identify the groups who will be impacted upon, and how do you facilitate communications both ways with them? If there were to be a position where it's easier for or has a positive impact, it might be that using digital tools more constructively could speed up rather than slow down part of the process.
So I think it's digitally led now in terms of some of the consultation websites that the likes of Lexington have been producing for us and working with us on, which has really interesting, engaging information, not just a bog standard website with some master plans on it.
So it's about kind of maybe using digital tools to identify those audiences. Once you've identified them, it's about getting them in the room and actually doing that meaningful engagement.
We've come a long way from the old Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where the plans were deposited in a small room, and if you missed your chance, that's not it. We've come a long way, and I agree with you, COVID's absolutely supercharged electronic engagement, but there's also now an expectation. So, the old site notice with a QR code, all of a sudden somebody can get it on the smartphone. The back office system needs to support all of that access to raw data, etc. All the way through to the plan application, the 5 boxes of EIA assessment that lands in a local authority's reception on Christmas Eve. That we've gone a long way from that situation.
It's human nature, isn't it, to object to an application. It takes a lot for someone to put pen to paper to support. So it's how we reach those parts of the community that want the development, because they'll just assume that it'll be approved.
People want to know, how is my view going to be affected? How high is that development going to be? What it's going to look like from my window? And I think that's where the data modelling is actually going to really help. But I think we need consistency as well across all the local authorities, and the same database as well, and the same basis on graphics, because until that changes, everyone's just confused and they don't know where to start.
I think a lot of engagement's already been sort of digitised as well, because the growth of social media, the growth of the Facebook groups, the community WhatsApp groups, etc. That is already digitised enormously. We might not have control of it, might not have any input into it, and the level of misinformation that goes around those groups is very. So actually, just having a grasp of what the issues are by somehow tapping into those groups is enormously useful.
Trust is massive for me. This is the one big game changer for digitisation, is showing that we're open, transparent, and it is building that trust with communities, that when you are doing that consultation, that community engagement, it's a done deal. We actually want your meaningful comments into the system, which then ultimately helps us deal with applications far more smoothly, because the communities know what it's about, they understand what the purpose of the development is, and we can have that more positive dialogue.
When you're able to get people in and present them with the facts and actually kind of break down some of those myths or kind of the lies that they might have been reading about on Facebook groups or in the WhatsApp groups, you're able to really shift their opinion. They might not turn from a negative to a positive, but at least they're walking out informed. And I think there's pockets of both public and private sector that have kind of gone ahead on certain areas. So like you say, 3D modelling, etc. I think the public sector is doing some great work in that space and kind of being across all of that from a bigger perspective. And then maybe the private sector has been more kind of thoughtful in its meaningful engagement and the approach it's taken with residents and communities, specifically around that kind of social value piece as well, and making sure that we're listening throughout that engagement process to pick out key threads and themes that will help that developer establish legacy long term. So that has been happening. I think it's a really good thing that now it's reaching a point where it's becoming much more mainstream.
More people are getting involved and more discussions are happening across different social media platforms around the whole borough. That not necessarily negative, but I think that's quite a lot for local politicians to cope with, potentially. You know, a high degree of public debate around what they're going to do when they actually allocate land. But my hunch is it will have a positive effects overall.
If AI is able to help answer some questions, because lots of people are engaged, they just ask questions. How does it affect me? Is it going to be too tall? Is it, what's reasonable? And actually, I think if it could improve some of that data flow both ways, that might actually remove some of the misrepresentation, the misunderstandings, etc. So, I'm not an advocate, I know nothing at all about AI, but local authorities particularly have responsibilities under the Equality Act, to make sure that there's access to everybody.
There has to be a system that actually makes sure I input data that is uniform to somebody else's input of data. And it comes down to very, very basic things. Get the basics right. So I might describe it's being in Liverpool as, and therefore put the nominal address as Liverpool. But what if somebody says Merseyside? Or what if somebody says the Pool? Who knows? So there has to be a uniform understanding of what it is that we have to enter into some form of record-making system. And that the basis of what we enter has to be coordinated right across the UK.
I think there's some interesting points there about social media and the kind of immediacy of information that is, councillors are constantly, phone doesn't stop ringing, you're tagged in 1,000,001 things on social, and it is information overload a little bit. So it'd be interesting to see. Yes, it's great that we absolutely get more people involved in the planning process, more residents engaged. But does that then create a scenario where councils just can't keep up with the amount of information they're receiving?
I think it comes back to that consistency across boroughs, because the amount of appraisals that we write for different developers, and you go onto a council's website and you spend hours just finding where the local plan is, what are the site allocations. If it was the same for every single authority, it'd make life so much easier.
The ability to track through documentation will become significantly easier. But it goes back to the point, we have to have a uniform system so everybody knows what they're talking about. And so there's going to be a radical change there. That effectively makes digitalisation not much more than a document management tool. But I think it's very important to get that right. Otherwise, we won't progress into the more exciting arenas where we could have 3D models and interactive using on interactive platforms such as iPads and iPhones. This is all about communication in truth. And so the way in which we will communicate on these matters will make some radical changes in the way our practice and professions operate.
Actually, by using a few different nuanced ways of engaging, you're able to kind of control a response back to audiences so that they feel that you really are listening and taking on board their feedback. So a point that Charlotte made, it's not about just engaging once and switching off those conversations. It's very much about keeping people informed throughout the process.
Yeah, the digital element of engagement is essentially a tool that should be able to enhance the process. For us, it's just one bit of a wider communications piece. I think we were just talking about how you've got to have lots of different human audiences in, no matter how much of it's done digitized or done by AI, and you've got to be able to link those. And the engagement side of planning is just one part of a wider process. So with a platform that should be able to do all the parts of the process called Lex Connect, to do the engagement side and all of the others. I think that I'm hopeful that with the right equipment and understanding in place, you'll be able to get the most out of this, but also make sure that works in your wider strategy, whether it's communication, which is my role, or planning or development. You've got different parts of the process and different audiences in achieving your objective. But from comms perspective, it's very positive.